How important is it for you to know NLP Eye Accessing Cues? Stay tuned. This is Damon from NLP Gym. NLP Techniques. What good are eye accessing cues? If you haven't already, please click subscribe to this YouTube channel so you can get these videos on a regular basis. I recently had a conversation with Steve Andreas. If you're not aware of who Steve Andreas is, you got some homework to do. Him and his wife, Connie Ray Andreas, have written some of the best books on NLP. I recently asked Steve about a video that I had seen about a scientist. It was a scientist who was trying to debunk NLP by basically saying that the eye accessing cues have never been proven, therefore NLP is a pseudoscience. Steve has a science background and he's very procedural and he likes proof, so I thought this would be a good question to ask him to see what his experience was with NLP eye accessing cues. Because my experience is that they're not as consistent as what they're taught in NLP. I sometimes will ask somebody to visualize something and they look down, or I ask them to get in touch with a feeling and they look up. So what is this about? Why is this not working like the patterns that are taught? And what Steve basically told me is that there could be a lot of issues going on there. For one, if a person is fully associated into a memory, they might be seeing it, as in say they're driving a car and they're actually in the memory as if they're driving a car. Well, they might look down at the steering wheel or they might look down at the road. So they're visualizing, but they're looking down because they're in the scene rather than remembering a movie of them driving where they're seeing themselves in the driver's seat. Also, if somebody's asked to construct a fire-breathing purple elephant and they look up and to the right to construct that, and then later you ask them to do it again, the fire-breathing purple elephant, they may look to the left because now this is a remembered image. It's no longer a created image because they've already seen it. Another thing could happen where if you ask somebody to think of or remember a traffic light, or do they know what a traffic light looks like. So you're thinking they're going to look up and to the left, but they look up and to the right instead. Now that could be because they know what a traffic light looks like, but instead of referring to one they've already seen before, they might actually construct it, which means they'll look up and to the right. There also could be situations like you ask somebody to access a feeling and they look up. And this could be because they need to see a picture of it first to reference it in order then to feel it. So why even learn eye accessing cues if they're not always consistent? You may have been frustrated by practicing this with someone and their eye movements are not following the patterns and you're wondering why that is. If you're practicing with someone who knows what you're doing, you can then ask them. If you ask them to construct something visually and they look in a different direction, just ask them what they were doing. And for any of the directions that they look in, and you'll get a much better understanding. It'll be a fun experience and you'll get a much better understanding of what's happening inside them, so that when you're doing it with people who don't know what you're doing, you'll have a better understanding of what the possibilities are. One of the most important things about watching eye accessing cues is rapport. But before I get into that, think about eye accessing cues as the individual language of that person, that the eye accessing cues are a form of communication. Anthropologists and linguists have linked languages to ways of thinking. So when you learn a different language, you actually learn to think in a different way. And people who speak different languages all have different sensibilities that are affected by language. It's easy to think of language or culture as affecting language rather than language affecting culture. But it's not really a cause and effect thing. It's more a relationship between the two. They influence each other. So when you're looking at eye accessing cues and you're watching this person's eyes move in different directions as they're thinking, you're actually watching a form of communication, their own individual language. And if you watch this long enough, just like a language, you start to pick it up. You start to understand it. You might not even know why you understand it, but you start to understand what that person's communicating. I was in an insurance sales appointment one time, and I noticed the client who I was attempting to sell an insurance policy to kept looking down and to his left and down and to his right. And he kept going back and forth. And what I noticed about that is he was talking to himself. He would say something to himself and then check in how he felt about that. So I started doing that. I started looking down to my left, down into my right, and actually imitating what he was doing. I was modeling him. So I would speak to myself and then check in with how I felt about that. The rapport started to build right away. And that's another great thing about noticing eye accessing cues, because if you come at it from a place of being curious about this person's experience, their reality, their world, they will feel that. That's a deep attention that you're giving them that they will feel, and you will go into rapport with that person. After I did this for a while and we gained rapport, then I started to lead him by saying, you might be saying to yourself this, and you might be feeling this, and then I would go back and forth. So I was following his pattern. Needless to say, I did get the sale. Of course, we don't know if it was because I was modeling him and I was doing all the noticing his eye accessing cues and feeding it back to him, but it certainly helped for sure in building rapport and trust with him. When you practice eye accessing cues, don't try to figure it out. Don't try to figure the person out. Just notice what you notice. Notice how their words are matching or not matching up with where they're looking and each cue. Just watch. Just absorb information with genuine curiosity. And a funny thing will start to happen. You will start to sort of understand that person better. And it's really interesting because a lot of times you don't even really know why. It's like you're picking up their language. You're picking up this communication. And you will start to understand the person better that way. Check out our website, nlp-gym.com. Follow us on Facebook for real-time updates on upcoming workshops and free practice sessions that I hold right here in Santa Cruz, California. If you like this video, please click like right down here and leave a comment or a question. I will get back to you. Stay tuned to the end of this video so you can see how you can get your hands on a free NLP online training. Take care.